I'll be helping Joel with some of the kitchen videos that we're going to be doing. So this week for Tomato Week, we're going to be making a pasta sauce as our second recipe. It'll be using the Roma tomatoes from the garden, some olive oil and garlic, and then we'll use a little bit of an herb mixture, which you can either do fresh herbs or dried herbs, whichever you have in your pantry. It's a pretty quick and easy recipe. You just have to simmer all of the ingredients together, the tomato, garlic, oil, herbs, and then that just gets thrown over the pasta at the end to make a really good dish. So in the last video, Joel talked about all the different tomato varieties that we're growing up here at Terra Nova. We have Red Robins, which are a cherry tomato kind. They're good for snacking. There's some hidden down here too, like Sun Golds. We have good slicing tomatoes. There's the Black Crimson and Italian Heirloom that we used in the last video to make the tomato sandwiches. These are also good slicers. This one's a mega slicer. And then we also have these, which are a paste tomato. So these tomatoes have less water content than any of the other tomatoes on the plate, and that's what makes these tomatoes good for making sauces, like pizza sauce or pasta sauce. So in this recipe, we're going to be using a few more spices than we used in the last one. So right here I have a dried herb blend, and this herb blend contains oregano, marjoram, thyme, rosemary, basil, and sage. It's like this, it's really fine. So you don't really need to use too much because they're dried herbs. But we do have these herbs fresh in the garden too. So this is basil right here. This one, oregano. And it's gone to seed, or well, it's flowering. But these are the leaves. So these leaves are what's chopped up in here. We have some thyme right here. They look kind of similar. Rosemary and sage. We don't have marjoram growing, but that's okay. So if you wanted, you can use any of these fresh herbs. We're going to use dried herbs today. Okay, so once you have your tomatoes all quartered, then you can just put them into a bowl and set aside for later. Alright, so the next ingredient you want to prep is your garlic. So this is just a dried bulb of garlic. I've already used some cloves. For this recipe, maybe we'll only need 1 or 2. It depends on how much garlic you like in your recipes. Oops, that's not the discard bowl. So if you like really garlicky pasta, feel free to put in 3 cloves. If you don't like garlic, you can put in 1 or none, but that may not taste as good. So, one secret to peeling garlic is if you get a knife that you're going to use to chop it, you put the knife on it, and then you just press down with your palm. And that'll kind of crack the clove and make it much easier to For most Italian dishes, you want to use olive oil instead of butter. You only need like 1 glug like that, basically. Maybe the equivalent of 2 tablespoons for how many tomatoes and garlic we have. And then you can start the burner, let's see. And you want to put it on a medium heat. If you have an electrical or induction burner, that'd be maybe number 5 or something. You want the oil to be hot before you add in the tomatoes. But it usually doesn't take too long to heat up the oil. So let's see, maybe 2 handfuls of salt go in to the pasta water, and you can just forget about it for half an hour until we come back. So you can tell when oil is ready by moving it around the pan, and if it starts to move more like water and it's not as thick, then that means that it's heated up and it'll coat the pan more easily. So this oil looks about ready to me. For this sauce, I put the tomatoes in first. Oh, so my oil wasn't that hot yet. That's okay. It'll heat up. But I usually put the tomatoes down first and then the garlic on top because I don't really want the garlic to get crispy or to get brown. It's more to flavor the whole sauce. And so I'll scatter it over the top of the tomatoes. and it'll take much longer to cook that way, but it also will have no chances of getting burned or anything. Okay, now you can hear a sizzle. For the herbs, if you're gonna be using dried herbs, you want maybe like a palmful, small palmful, maybe that much. I would say that's maybe about a tablespoon. And scatter that over. So this has been cooking on the stove for maybe about 10 minutes or so, maybe close to 5 minutes. You can see some juice right here on the bottom of the pan. So I'm gonna just sort of start mashing the tomatoes a little bit, try and break down the skin, break down some of that inner flesh. And I'll leave it for maybe about 10 more minutes, and we'll come back and check it. Alright, so we're checking back in here, the tomato sauce. As you can see, it's broken down a lot, really saucy. The skins are kind of curling and cooking. At this point, it's good to taste it to see if you need to add any more seasonings. You don't want it this liquidy. You want it to be a little thicker than just that. Not sure if you can see that. But right now, the sauce part of it is pretty watery. So it's just kind of dripping off the spoon pretty easily. You want it a little thicker than that. And one thing that'll help thicken it is the starch from the pasta water. So in about 10 minutes, we'll start the pasta water and check back in on the sauce. Okay, so you always want to put a lid when you're boiling water. It'll boil faster that way and you'll waste less energy. While it's boiling, we can give this another little stir and then just keep an eye on the pot. Once it boils, then you can add your pasta. So it's time to put the pasta in. It's probably enough for 2 people if they aren't too hungry. So it looks like we have about 1 minute left on the pasta. So I'm gonna take my measuring scoop and just get 1 scoop of water. And I'm gonna put a little bit in to my sauce, just a little bit, and start mixing. Turn the heat back up to medium. Put a little bit more. So this, first of all, salts your sauce because we didn't add any salt to it earlier. But the starch also makes it so that when you add the pasta to the sauce, it'll stick to the pasta better. The starch in the water from the pasta is now transferred into the sauce, or some of it at least has been. And so it'll kind of smooth out the texture of it. It'll make everything a little more cohesive, essentially. The sauce with itself and then the sauce with the pasta. So you can see even now on the edges, see it looks a little more silky, a little shinier. That's exactly the look that you want. So I'm gonna taste the sauce here again real quick and see. So what I'm tasting for is salt, but also seasoning. Yeah, so that tastes pretty well balanced to me. So I'm gonna turn it back down to low because I don't want all this water to evaporate again. This is basically exactly how I want it when the pasta's done. So, and that also is done. I'm gonna go over to the sink and drain it, and then come back and toss it in with the sauce. Alrighty, so now the pasta's drained. It's going in with the sauce. Oop, that's some stragglers. There you go. And now maybe the only thing this will need, if you like, some black pepper. If you have any Parmesan cheese, you can just go ahead and grate that on your plate when you serve yourself. And this is tomato pasta from the garden. Maybe I'll put some of these fresh herbs on there too.